let me invite you to consider something quietly unsettling about the way you experience the world. Something so ordinary that most people never stop to question it. Every moment of your life, you rely on your senses to tell you what reality is. Your eyes open and you believe you see the world as it truly exists. Your ears hear sounds and you assume you are hearing everything around you. Your skin feels the air, the temperature, the textures of objects, and all of it seems to confirm that the world you perceive is complete and reliable. Yet what if I told you that what you experience every day is not the full picture of reality, but only a narrow fragment of it, a thin slice of an immeasurably larger field of existence that your senses simply cannot detect? You might find that idea difficult to accept at first, because the senses feel trustworthy. Vision in particular creates a powerful illusion of completeness. When you look around a room, you see walls, furniture, people, colors, shapes, and movement, and it seems obvious that what you see is everything that is there. But modern science has revealed something extraordinary about the way perception works. The human eye does not see the full spectrum of light. In fact, it detects only a tiny band of electromagnetic frequencies known as visible light. Beyond that narrow band exist vast ranges of radiation: infrared, ultraviolet, radio waves, microwaves, X-rays, gamma rays, all moving through the same space around you every moment of the day, completely invisible to your eyes. The room you are sitting in right now is filled with signals your senses cannot perceive. Radio waves carrying voices and music move through the air. Infrared radiation radiates from warm objects. Ultraviolet light from the sun passes through the atmosphere. Entire worlds of information are present, yet your brain filters them out because your biological senses were never designed to detect them. If your eyes could suddenly perceive the full electromagnetic spectrum, the familiar world around you would transform instantly into something far stranger and far richer than anything you have ever seen. The same limitation applies to your hearing. The human ear detects only a narrow range of sound frequencies. Dogs can hear pitches far higher than we can. Elephants communicate with deep infrasonic vibrations that travel for miles across the ground, completely unnoticed by human ears. Bats navigate the night using ultrasonic pulses that create detailed acoustic maps of their surroundings. The soundscape of the natural world is vastly larger than the small portion your ears translate into audible noise. Even your sense of touch operates within strict boundaries. Your skin detects pressure, temperature, and vibration within certain ranges, but countless other physical interactions pass through you unnoticed. Magnetic fields move through space around you. Subatomic particles stream continuously through your body from cosmic sources far beyond Earth. The atmosphere itself contains layers of motion and energy invisible to your awareness. When you begin to recognize these limits, an intriguing realization emerges. What you call reality is not the totality of existence. It is a filtered version of it, a simplified interface constructed by your nervous system so that you can navigate the environment efficiently. Your brain receives signals from your senses and translates them into colors, sounds, textures, and shapes that feel solid and dependable. Yet these experiences are interpretations rather than direct encounters with the underlying structure of the universe. In other words, perception is not a window through which you see reality exactly as it is. It is more like a translation system that converts certain signals into experiences your mind can understand. Imagine wearing a pair of glasses that allow you to see only one color while the rest of the spectrum remains hidden. Over time, you would come to believe that the world contains only that color because it would be the only one you ever encounter. Human perception functions in a similar way. Your senses reveal just enough of the universe to keep you alive, but they conceal far more than they reveal. This insight has profound implications for the way we understand existence. If your senses capture only a fraction of the signals surrounding you, then the universe may contain layers of reality operating beyond the boundaries of ordinary perception. The possibility does not require mystical assumptions. It follows naturally from the recognition that perception is limited. Consider how technological instruments have already expanded human awareness beyond biological senses. Telescopes reveal galaxies invisible to the naked eye. Microscopes expose microscopic organisms living on surfaces that appear perfectly clean. Radio receivers translate invisible electromagnetic waves into voices and music. Infrared cameras allow us to see heat patterns in total darkness. Each new instrument extends the range of perception, revealing aspects of reality that were always present but previously hidden. Every time humanity invents a new way to observe the universe, we discover that reality is larger than we imagined. The same principle may apply to consciousness itself. The mind you use to observe the world might possess capacities that extend beyond the ordinary senses. Capacities that remain dormant simply because most people never learn to explore them. Throughout history, philosophers and contemplative traditions have suggested that human awareness may be capable of perceiving subtler dimensions of experience when attention is directed inward rather than outward, whether those possibilities prove to be metaphysical, psychological, or something entirely different. The first step toward exploring them begins with a simple recognition. The world you see is not the whole of reality. It is a carefully filtered representation designed by evolution to help you survive. Once that realization settles in, something remarkable happens. The familiar world no longer appears closed and predictable. Instead, it begins to feel mysterious again, like a doorway opening onto a much larger landscape of existence, waiting quietly beyond the boundaries of ordinary perception. In the previous reflection, you began to notice something quietly astonishing. The senses you rely on every day reveal only a narrow slice of reality. Your eyes translate a small band of light, your ears decode a limited range of vibration, and your brain assembles those signals into the convincing experience you call the world. Yet once that realization settles in, another question begins to rise naturally, and it is a question far more personal than the first. If the senses perceive only a fragment of existence, then what part of you might still be capable of sensing the rest? For most of human history, people did not assume that perception ended with the five senses. They believed that behind the ordinary sensory mind there existed a deeper faculty of awareness, something quieter but far more sensitive. Some traditions called it intuition. Others called it inner sight, and many described it simply as the perception of the soul. The language varied from culture to culture, but the central idea was surprisingly consistent. Human beings were not thought to be limited to the outer senses alone. Beneath those senses existed another way of knowing that did not depend on eyes, ears, or touch. Imagine standing in a quiet forest just before sunrise. The air is still, the sky remains dim, and the world around you seems suspended in a kind of silent expectancy. In moments like that, something subtle often happens to awareness. Your senses continue to function, but attention becomes wider and softer at the same time. You begin to feel the atmosphere of the place, rather than merely observing its objects. The rustling of leaves, the coolness of the air, the faint movement of wind across the ground, everything seems connected in a way that is difficult to explain with ordinary language. It is as if your awareness briefly shifts from analyzing the world to simply perceiving it. Experiences like this are more common than people realize. They appear in quiet moments of reflection, in sudden flashes of intuition, or in those strange instances when you feel that you understand something before you have logically figured it out. A person may walk into a room and instantly sense tension between two people who have not spoken a word. Another person might feel a sudden certainty about a decision long before the reasons become clear. These moments often pass quickly, and the analytical mind tends to dismiss them. Yet they hint at a form of perception that operates beneath the surface of ordinary thought. Children often display this kind of sensitivity naturally. When very young, they respond to emotional atmospheres with remarkable immediacy. A child entering a room can sometimes sense whether the environment feels warm and welcoming or uneasy and tense, even when adults are pretending that everything is normal. As people grow older, however, the demands of structured learning and social conditioning gradually redirect attention toward measurable information and logical explanation. The inner sensitivity that once operated freely becomes overshadowed by the louder activity of the analytical mind. This shift does not necessarily mean the deeper perception disappears. It simply becomes quieter. Think of the mind as a vast landscape of awareness. The sensory mind occupies the bright surface of that landscape, constantly processing images, sounds, and language. Beneath that surface lies a far broader territory of subtle impressions and intuitive understanding. When attention remains completely absorbed by the outer senses, the deeper layers remain unnoticed, much like stars hidden by the glare of daylight. Yet the stars are still there. They simply require darkness and stillness to become visible. Moments of deep contemplation sometimes reopen access to that inner perception. When the mind grows calm and the constant stream of external stimuli quiets down, awareness begins to shift inward. Thoughts slow, attention deepens, and subtle impressions that were previously drowned out by noise begin to appear. Many people describe this state as a feeling of clarity or expanded awareness. Insights arrive without effort, as though they had been waiting patiently beneath the surface of thought. Dreaming offers another glimpse of this hidden capacity. Every night when you fall asleep, your physical senses withdraw from the outer world. Your body rests motionless. Your eyes remain closed. And yet your awareness continues to generate experiences. You see landscapes, hear voices, move through environments, and encounter people or events that feel completely real while the dream is unfolding. During those moments, your mind is clearly capable of perceiving and interacting with a world that does not depend on the physical senses at all. The existence of dreams demonstrates something remarkable about consciousness. Awareness does not require the external world in order to experience reality. It possesses the ability to generate environments of perception internally. While scientists explain dreams through neurological processes, the experience itself reveals how flexible and expansive human consciousness truly is. Philosophers throughout history often suggested that this deeper capacity of awareness might extend beyond dreams. They proposed that consciousness could perceive subtle forms of information that ordinary senses cannot detect. These ideas were expressed through spiritual language in ancient texts, yet they also reflect a simple observation. The mind is capable of perceiving patterns, meanings, and connections that go far beyond direct sensory input. Modern psychology approaches this topic through the study of intuition and subconscious processing. The brain constantly gathers and analyzes enormous amounts of information outside conscious awareness. Long before the conscious mind understands a situation, deeper layers of cognition may already be recognizing patterns and relationships. What people call intuition may sometimes be the moment when that deeper processing reaches the surface of awareness. Whether interpreted spiritually or scientifically, the underlying insight remains the same. Human perception is not limited to the five senses alone. Beneath the sensory interface lies a deeper level of awareness capable of perceiving subtler patterns of reality. The challenge is that this deeper perception rarely appears in the middle of noise and distraction. It emerges most clearly in stillness, in moments when the mind becomes quiet enough to notice the faint signals that usually go unnoticed. And once a person begins to sense that quieter dimension of awareness within themselves, the world no longer feels confined to what the eyes and ears can measure. It begins to feel larger, layered, and far more mysterious than ordinary perception first suggested. Every moment of existence leaves a trace somewhere in the universe. When a stone falls into water, the ripples spread outward long after the initial impact disappears. When a tree grows through the decades, the rings hidden inside its trunk quietly record the memory of every passing season. Even the faint light arriving from distant stars carries information about events that occurred millions or even billions of years ago. The universe is not merely a stage where things appear and vanish. It behaves far more like a vast system that preserves the echoes of everything that has ever happened. Modern science increasingly speaks about reality in terms of information. Physicists now recognize that every interaction between particles alters the structure of the surrounding fields. When energy moves, information moves with it. Even when matter transforms or dissolves, the information describing that event does not simply disappear. It changes form, disperses across space, and becomes woven into the larger fabric of the cosmos. This idea has become so central to modern physics that many researchers now describe the universe itself as a kind of informational structure, a system in which the history of events is encoded in the arrangement of energy and matter. Long before scientific language existed to describe such ideas, ancient philosophical traditions proposed something surprisingly similar. They suggested that the universe contains a subtle field that quietly records every experience, every action, and every thought that has ever occurred. This field was not imagined as a physical library filled with books or symbols, but as a kind of invisible medium in which the memory of reality is continuously preserved. Over time, this concept became known as the Akashic Records. The word Akasha comes from an ancient Sanskrit term, often translated as ether, or the fundamental space in which everything exists. In early philosophical systems, Akasha was described as the most subtle layer of nature, the invisible foundation that allows energy, vibration, and consciousness to move through the universe, while the other elements, earth, water, fire, and air, represented forms of physical matter or energy. Akasha was thought to represent the field in which all of those elements unfold. Within this field, according to ancient thinkers, every event leaves an imprint that becomes part of the ongoing memory of existence. One way to imagine this idea is to think about the surface of a calm lake. When something touches the water, even gently, ripples expand outward across the surface. Those ripples may eventually fade from sight, yet the movement has already altered the entire body of water. The disturbance becomes part of the lake's internal motion, even after the visible pattern disappears. In a similar way, every event in the universe may create disturbances within the deeper informational field that underlies reality. If reality truly operates through interconnected fields of energy, then every action produces waves of influence that spread far beyond the moment in which they occur. A single thought changes the electrical patterns within the brain. A spoken word moves the air through vibrations that travel outward in expanding waves. A physical action alters the positions of particles in ways that affect countless interactions afterward. Each event becomes part of a chain of influences that continues unfolding long after the original moment has passed. From this perspective, existence resembles an immense network of interconnected processes rather than a collection of isolated events. The Akashic concept proposes that the deeper structure of the universe functions almost like a memory system, continuously storing the informational patterns produced by everything that occurs within it. Modern technological systems offer a helpful analogy. When a person speaks into a microphone, their voice becomes a series of vibrations moving through the air. A recording device converts those vibrations into electrical signals, and those signals can then be stored as digital information. A brief conversation that lasted only a few seconds can be preserved indefinitely in the memory of a computer. The original sound fades away, yet the informational pattern describing it remains intact. Now imagine extending this principle to the scale of the universe itself. Every interaction between particles generates changes in surrounding energy fields. Those changes propagate outward, influencing other interactions across space and time. If the universe truly behaves as a vast web of fields and forces, then the information describing every event may become distributed throughout that web. In this sense, the cosmos itself might function as a kind of recording medium. Ancient philosophers used symbolic language to describe this possibility. They suggested that consciousness, under certain conditions, might be able to perceive fragments of this universal archive. Individuals who entered deep states of awareness sometimes reported receiving insights that seemed to arise from a source beyond personal memory. Such experiences were interpreted as moments when the mind briefly touched the informational field that preserves the history of existence. Whether these accounts represent genuine access to a cosmic information field or simply the extraordinary pattern recognition ability of the human mind remains open to interpretation. Yet the persistence of this idea across cultures is remarkable. Civilizations separated by geography and centuries often arrived at the same basic intuition: the universe remembers. Every action you take becomes part of that memory. Every moment of thought leaves subtle changes in the activity of the brain. Every movement alters the arrangement of matter and energy around you. The smallest decision you make sends ripples of influence outward through the network of relationships that connect every part of existence. Reality, therefore, begins to appear less like a sequence of disconnected moments and more like a continuously unfolding record of experience. Events do not vanish into emptiness once they pass. They become woven into the intricate informational structure that defines the history of the universe. Seen from this perspective, existence itself resembles an immense archive, one that is constantly expanding as each moment of life leaves its imprint upon the vast field in which all things occur. Consider for a moment how quietly powerful a single thought can be. A thought appears in the mind without weight, without sound, without any visible form. Yet it can change the course of a human life in an instant. One idea can inspire a scientific discovery, begin a revolution, or guide a person toward a completely different destiny. Thoughts seem invisible and fleeting, but their consequences ripple outward through the world in ways that can last for centuries. When viewed from this perspective, thinking begins to look less like a private mental activity and more like a subtle force interacting with the larger fabric of reality. Every thought you have begins as a pattern of electrical activity inside the brain. Billions of neurons communicate through rapid pulses of energy, creating intricate networks of signals that form the images, memories, and ideas moving through your awareness. Modern neuroscience has shown that thinking is not an abstract event floating in emptiness. It is a physical process involving measurable changes in the brain's electrical and chemical states. These signals generate electromagnetic fields that extend slightly beyond the skull, forming a faint but real energetic signature produced by mental activity. Although these fields are extremely subtle, their existence reveals something important. Thought is not purely imaginary. It produces measurable patterns of energy that interact with the physical environment, even if those interactions are too delicate for everyday perception. The brain functions almost like a living transmitter, constantly generating waves of activity as thoughts form, evolve, and dissolve. Imagine dropping a pebble into a still pond. The moment the pebble touches the surface, circular waves begin expanding outward in every direction. The ripples gradually weaken as they travel, yet they continue spreading across the water long after the initial splash has disappeared. A similar principle may apply to the mental events occurring inside the human mind. Each thought creates patterns of activity that propagate outward through the networks of energy fields surrounding the body. From this viewpoint, thinking becomes more than a silent internal process. It becomes a form of interaction with the environment. Ancient philosophical traditions often expressed this idea through symbolic language. They suggested that the universe behaves like a vast field capable of receiving and storing impressions from every form of activity occurring within it. Just as a recording surface can preserve the vibrations of a voice, the deeper layers of reality were believed to preserve the subtle imprints created by human consciousness. In this framework, thoughts are not isolated mental flickers that vanish instantly. They become patterns impressed into the larger informational field that surrounds all existence. The concept may seem abstract at first, yet everyday experience provides hints that thought possesses a shaping influence. Consider the way beliefs affect human behavior. A person who deeply believes they are capable of achieving something begins to act differently from someone who is convinced they will fail. Confidence alters posture, speech, and decision-making. Over time, those changes influence opportunities, relationships, and outcomes. The original thought, which began as a quiet mental image, gradually reorganizes external circumstances through a chain of actions and reactions. Another example appears in the collective power of shared ideas. When a new concept spreads through a society, it can transform entire cultures. Scientific theories, political philosophies, and spiritual teachings all begin as thoughts in the minds of individuals. Once expressed and shared, those thoughts influence millions of people and reshape the structure of communities and institutions. History itself can be viewed as the unfolding consequence of ideas moving through human consciousness. Seen from this perspective, the human mind functions not only as a receiver of information, but also as a generator of influence. Each thought contributes to the ongoing conversation between consciousness and the universe. Some thinkers have proposed that the informational field described in earlier traditions might operate much like a vast network connecting individual minds. If every thought leaves an energetic trace, then those traces could accumulate within the deeper layers of reality, forming patterns that influence future events and perceptions. The Akashic concept, described in earlier traditions, reflects precisely this possibility, a universal archive in which every thought, action, and experience becomes part of the informational structure of existence. Modern science does not yet fully understand how consciousness interacts with physical reality at the deepest levels. Yet research in fields such as neuroscience, psychology, and quantum theory continues, exploring the relationship between observation, information, and the structure of the universe. Some theories suggest that consciousness may play a more active role in shaping experience than previously believed. While many questions remain unresolved, the possibility that thought interacts with reality in subtle ways continues to attract growing curiosity. Regardless of how these mysteries are ultimately explained, one insight becomes difficult to ignore. Thoughts are not trivial events. They represent the most fundamental form of creative activity available to the human mind. Before any invention appears in the physical world, it exists first as a thought. Before any work of art is created, the image arises in imagination. Before a life changes direction, a new idea enters awareness and begins guiding action toward a different future. The invisible precedes the visible. In that sense, thinking can be understood as the first stage of creation. The mind forms patterns that gradually translate into speech, movement, and physical change. What begins as a silent impression within consciousness eventually becomes part of the external world through a chain of actions that follow. When this process is viewed within the larger framework of a universe that records information, the role of thought becomes even more intriguing. Each idea that forms in the mind may contribute a subtle imprint to the informational field that preserves the unfolding story of existence. The human mind becomes both a reader and a writer within the cosmic archive, continuously receiving impressions from the surrounding world while simultaneously adding new patterns to the vast memory of the universe. Every moment of attention, therefore, carries creative potential. Thoughts arise, shape perception, influence behavior, and leave traces within the larger network of interactions that define reality itself. What appears to be a quiet inner process may actually be one of the most powerful forces participating in the ongoing evolution of the universe. Throughout history, there have been moments when human understanding seems to leap forward in a sudden flash, as if knowledge appeared out of nowhere and landed directly in the mind of a single individual. A scientist awakens in the middle of the night with the solution to a complex problem that had resisted months of effort. A composer hears an entire symphony unfolding within their mind before a single note has been written on paper. A mathematician suddenly perceives an elegant pattern hidden behind numbers that once seemed chaotic and unrelated. These moments often arrive without warning, and those who experience them frequently describe the sensation in similar language. The insight does not feel like something slowly constructed through reasoning. It feels as though the answer was revealed. Many of the greatest thinkers in history spoke openly about this mysterious experience. Nikola Tesla once described how entire machines appeared in his mind with perfect clarity, allowing him to test their movements mentally before ever building them physically. Albert Einstein spoke about the role of imagination and intuitive insight in forming his theories long before mathematics confirmed them. The chemist Auguste Kekulé famously reported that the structure of the benzene molecule appeared to him in a dream, symbolized by a snake biting its own tail. In each of these cases, the breakthrough did not arrive through ordinary step-by-step logic. It arrived as a sudden illumination. Moments like these raise a fascinating question. Where does such knowledge come from? One explanation suggests that the human mind possesses extraordinary abilities to recognize patterns beneath the surface of complex information. When a person studies a problem intensely, the brain continues working on it, even when conscious attention moves elsewhere. Eventually, the subconscious mind organizes the fragments of information into a coherent structure, and the result rises into awareness as a sudden insight. In this interpretation, revelation is not mystical. It is the mind completing a puzzle behind the scenes. Yet many thinkers throughout history sense something even more intriguing behind these experiences. They believe that the mind might not function solely as a generator of ideas, but also as a receiver of information from a deeper field of intelligence embedded within the universe itself. Imagine for a moment that reality contains an immense reservoir of information accumulated across the entire history of existence. Every discovery, every idea, Every pattern observed in nature would be part of this vast store of knowledge. If consciousness were capable of interacting with such a field, then moments of inspiration might represent brief connections with that universal library. Ancient philosophical traditions express this possibility through the idea that wisdom exists not only within individual minds but within the structure of the cosmos itself. Knowledge was thought to reside in subtle layers of reality that could be accessed when the human mind became quiet, focused, and receptive. Under those conditions, awareness might begin to perceive patterns that normally remain hidden beneath the noise of everyday thought. Even without invoking mystical interpretations, there is something remarkable about the way creative insight often appears. Many inventors report that their most important ideas arrived when they were not actively struggling with the problem. Solutions appear during walks, moments of rest, or even in dreams. The mind seems to reach a state where information reorganizes itself spontaneously, revealing relationships that were invisible before. This phenomenon suggests that intelligence may operate through processes deeper than conscious reasoning alone. Consider how the brain functions as a network of billions of interconnected neurons. Each neuron forms thousands of connections with others, creating an immense web capable of processing vast amounts of information simultaneously. When a person studies a subject intensely, these networks become increasingly refined, allowing subtle patterns to emerge from seemingly unrelated details. Over time, the brain becomes capable of recognizing structures that ordinary perception might overlook. In this sense, genius may not be a mysterious gift reserved for a few extraordinary individuals. It may represent the ability of the mind to reach deeper levels of perception where hidden connections become visible. What appears to be sudden inspiration might actually be the moment when the mind aligns with patterns that have always existed within the fabric of reality. Nature itself is filled with such patterns waiting to be discovered. The laws governing planetary motion, the mathematical symmetries underlying physical forces, and the elegant structures found in biological systems all suggest that the universe contains an underlying order. Scientists and philosophers alike have often expressed wonder at how the human mind is capable of understanding these patterns at all. Why should a brain made of biological cells be able to comprehend the mathematical principles governing the motion of galaxies? This question has fascinated thinkers for centuries. Some have suggested that the answer lies in the possibility that human consciousness is not separate from the universe but deeply connected to it. If the mind is part of the same cosmic process that generates the patterns of nature, then perhaps it can recognize those patterns because it shares the same underlying structure. Moments of insight might therefore represent a kind of resonance between the human mind and the deeper intelligence embedded within the universe. Whether interpreted as subconscious pattern recognition or as connection with a universal field of knowledge, the experience of revelation reminds us that understanding does not always arrive through slow accumulation of facts. Sometimes it appears suddenly, illuminating an entire landscape of meaning in a single moment. These flashes of insight have shaped the course of human history. They have produced scientific revolutions, philosophical breakthroughs, and works of art that continue inspiring generations long after their creators are gone. What begins as a quiet realization inside one mind can eventually transform the understanding of entire civilizations. The phenomenon of genius therefore invites us to look at the human mind with renewed curiosity. Beneath the surface of ordinary thinking lies a depth of perception capable of reaching far beyond routine reasoning. When attention becomes focused, curiosity becomes intense, and the mind opens itself to possibility. Insights sometimes emerge that feel as though they arrived from a place larger than the individual who receives them. Moments like these reveal how vast the landscape of human understanding truly is, and how much of it may still be waiting quietly beyond the edges of our current awareness. Walk into any forest, examine a crystal under a microscope, or observe the delicate symmetry of a snowflake landing on your hand, and a quiet pattern begins to reveal itself. Nature rarely builds randomly. Beneath the endless variety of shapes and forms that fill the world, certain structures appear again and again, repeating with remarkable consistency across completely different scales of existence. Branches divide in similar proportions whether they belong to a towering oak tree or the delicate veins of a leaf. The spiral of a seashell echoes the same graceful curve found in distant galaxies. Even the microscopic architecture of living cells displays an order that appears both elegant and precise. These patterns hint at something profound. The universe seems to organize itself according to geometric principles. Geometry, in its simplest sense, is the study of shape, proportion, and spatial relationship. Long before modern mathematics existed, ancient civilizations noticed that many natural forms followed consistent geometric patterns. The Egyptians used geometric proportions when designing pyramids and temples aligned with celestial movements. Greek philosophers believed that certain perfect shapes, such as the triangle, the circle, and the sphere, represented the fundamental building blocks of the cosmos. In India and Tibet, complex geometric diagrams known as mandalas were created as visual representations of the underlying structure of existence. Across cultures separated by geography and time, people arrived at the same intuition. Geometry seemed to reveal the hidden order behind the visible world. Consider the structure of a honeycomb. Bees build their hives using hexagonal cells, each one fitting perfectly against the next. This arrangement allows them to store the maximum amount of honey while using the least possible amount of wax. Mathematicians later confirmed that the hexagon is the most efficient shape for filling a surface with equal-sized spaces. What appears to be a simple instinct in bees turns out to follow a precise geometric principle. A similar elegance appears in crystals. When minerals form under the right conditions, their atoms arrange themselves into repeating patterns that produce perfectly symmetrical shapes. Quartz crystals grow as hexagonal prisms, while snowflakes develop intricate six-sided structures. The shapes differ in detail, yet the same underlying symmetry governs their formation. These patterns emerge because geometry offers stability. When matter organizes itself according to certain symmetrical arrangements, the resulting structures require less energy to maintain. Over time, the universe naturally favors patterns that balance forces efficiently, and those patterns often correspond to simple geometric relationships. This insight led ancient thinkers to view geometry not merely as a branch of mathematics, but as a language through which the universe expresses its structure. They called it sacred geometry because they believed these patterns revealed the fundamental order of creation itself. One of the simplest examples is the circle. A circle represents perfect symmetry because every point along its edge lies the same distance from its center. This simple relationship appears constantly in nature. Planets form roughly spherical shapes because gravity pulls matter equally toward a central point. Ripples spreading across water create expanding circles. Even the eye itself, the organ through which we observe the world, is shaped around circular symmetry. Another foundational shape is the triangle. When 3 points connect in space, they form the simplest, stable structure possible. Engineers rely on triangular frameworks when constructing bridges and towers because triangles distribute forces evenly across their sides. In nature, triangular patterns appear in molecular structures, crystal lattices, and even the arrangement of certain plant forms. As geometric patterns become more complex, they begin combining into intricate frameworks that appear throughout the natural world. Spirals, hexagons, fractal branching patterns, and symmetrical lattices all emerge from simple geometric rules repeated over time. Each pattern represents a balance between forces shaping the material world. Modern science continues to uncover how deeply geometry is embedded in the structure of reality. At the microscopic level, atoms bond together at specific angles determined by geometric relationships between their energy fields. Molecular structures form repeating shapes that influence the properties of matter. DNA itself, the molecule carrying the instructions for life, coils into a double helix whose proportions follow precise spatial relationships. Even the large-scale structure of the universe reflects geometric organization. Astronomers mapping the distribution of galaxies across vast regions of space have discovered that matter forms an enormous cosmic web. Filaments of galaxies stretch across billions of light-years, connecting clusters of matter in patterns that resemble complex geometric networks. Seen from this perspective, geometry becomes more than an abstract concept invented by mathematicians. It appears to be a fundamental organizing principle woven into the fabric of reality itself. The term sacred does not necessarily imply religion in this context. Rather, it reflects the sense of wonder that arises when recognizing how deeply ordered the universe truly is. The same geometric relationships appear in places separated by enormous differences in scale, from microscopic crystals to planetary systems to galactic structures. This repeating order suggests that the universe follows underlying rules that shape how matter and energy arrange themselves. Geometry provides a visible map of those rules, revealing the hidden architecture guiding the formation of natural structures. Once you begin noticing these patterns, they appear everywhere. The branching of lightning resembles the branching of trees. River networks mirror the pathways of veins in the human body. Patterns within seashells echo the curves traced by hurricanes spinning across the ocean. The world stops looking random. Instead, it begins to resemble a vast design built from repeating mathematical relationships. Geometry quietly guides the formation of structure, allowing complexity to arise from simple rules repeated across time and space. Within this perspective, the shapes surrounding us, circles, spirals, hexagons, and lattices, become more than decorative patterns. They become clues pointing toward the deeper blueprint that governs how the universe builds itself. Among the many geometric patterns that appear throughout nature and human history, one design has captured the imagination of philosophers, artists, and mathematicians for centuries. It is a pattern made entirely from overlapping circles. Yet within its simplicity lies a structure so rich with relationships that it seems to contain an entire map of geometry hidden inside it. This pattern is known as the flower of life, and once you understand how it is formed, you begin to see why so many cultures believed it reflected something fundamental about the architecture of reality itself. The pattern begins with the simplest possible act in geometry, drawing a circle. A single circle represents perfect symmetry, a form in which every point along its edge lies at the same distance from the center. From this starting point, another circle is drawn, using the same radius, with its center placed exactly on the edge of the first. The two circles intersect, creating a shape that resembles the outline of an almond or an eye. When additional circles are added using the same rule, each new center placed on the circumference of an existing circle, a network of interlocking forms begins to appear. As this process continues, the circles expand outward, each one intersecting with several others in precise and balanced ways. The result is a repeating pattern that resembles a field of petals spreading across the surface. From a distance, the design looks like a stylized flower, which is how it received its name. Yet, the visual beauty of the pattern is only the beginning. When mathematicians and artists examine it more closely, they discover that the flower of life contains an astonishing number of geometric relationships hidden within its structure. Where circles intersect, new shapes emerge. Triangles appear where three intersections connect. Hexagons arise when 6 circles surround a central point. Within the lattice of overlapping lines, one can trace cubes, pyramids, and even complex three-dimensional frameworks. The entire structure grows from the simple repetition of circles, yet it gradually reveals a rich network of geometry nested inside itself. Ancient civilizations seem to recognize the significance of this pattern long before modern mathematics analyzed its properties. Variations of the flower of life have been discovered carved into temple walls, etched into stone surfaces, and incorporated into sacred art across many parts of the world. Archaeologists have found versions of the design in ancient Egyptian temples, medieval manuscripts, Islamic art, and East Asian architecture. Cultures separated by oceans and centuries repeatedly return to the same geometric motif. This widespread appearance suggests that the pattern was not merely decorative. Many traditions believed it represented a visual expression of the underlying order of creation. The fascination becomes easier to understand when you consider how the pattern grows. Nothing about the flower of life is arbitrary. Each circle follows the same rule, maintaining the same distance from its neighbors. Because of this consistency, the design expands with perfect balance. Every new layer integrates seamlessly with the previous one, creating harmony across the entire structure. Nature often builds in exactly this way. A crystal grows by repeating the same molecular pattern again and again, A honeycomb expands outward as bees add new hexagonal cells that match the existing ones perfectly. Living organisms develop through processes in which cells divide according to simple rules that produce increasingly complex forms. Repetition combined with symmetry allows structure to emerge gradually without losing stability. The flower of life demonstrates this principle visually. From a single circle arises a network capable of generating countless geometric relationships. Within the pattern, one can derive several well-known forms studied in geometry, including the Platonic solids, symmetrical three-dimensional shapes that fascinated philosophers in ancient Greece. These shapes represent some of the most stable arrangements of matter possible, and they appear naturally in molecular structures and crystalline formations. The pattern, therefore, functions almost like a geometric seed. It contains the potential for many other structures to emerge from its framework. Artists and architects have also found inspiration in these relationships. Geometric frameworks derived from the flower of life have influenced decorative art, architectural layouts, and symbolic diagrams across centuries. The design offers both aesthetic harmony and mathematical precision, making it appealing to those who seek order and balance in visual form. Yet the deeper significance of the flower of life lies not only in its history or its beauty. The pattern illustrates how complex structures can arise from the repetition of simple rules. A single circle repeated consistently produces an entire network of relationships. The design grows organically, expanding outward while maintaining symmetry and coherence. This principle appears everywhere in the natural world. The branching patterns of rivers emerge from the repeated flow of water carving paths through soil. The delicate geometry of snowflakes forms as water molecules arrange themselves according to basic physical laws during freezing. Spiral galaxies develop through the rotation and gravitational interactions of stars over immense periods of time. Each of these phenomena demonstrates how simple processes can generate intricate structures. The flower of life offers a visual metaphor for that universal process. It shows how unity can give rise to complexity without losing harmony. Every part of the pattern remains connected to the same original rule from which it emerged. Seen from this perspective, the design becomes more than a historical symbol or an artistic motif. It becomes a reminder that the universe may be built through repeating patterns that operate consistently across many levels of scale. From the smallest arrangements of atoms to the vast structures of galaxies, the same underlying principles of symmetry and proportion appear again and again. Geometry quietly guides the formation of structure, shaping the way matter organizes itself within the larger framework of reality. The flower of life captures that idea in a single image, a network of circles expanding outward, revealing layer after layer of hidden relationships within a pattern that began with the simplest shape imaginable. Stand in front of a sunflower and look closely at its center. At first, it appears to be nothing more than a dense collection of seeds packed tightly together. Yet the longer you observe it, the more a hidden order begins to reveal itself. The seeds are not scattered randomly. They are arranged in spirals that radiate outward from the center in two directions, forming a pattern so precise that it almost looks deliberately designed. If someone patiently counts the spirals moving to the left and the spirals moving to the right, something remarkable often appears. The numbers frequently belong to a very particular mathematical sequence, 21 and 34, or Phyrotridaiv and Femogaltrides, sometimes even 55 and 89. These numbers are part of a sequence that has fascinated mathematicians for centuries. It is called the Fibonacci sequence, named after the Italian mathematician Leonardo Fibonacci, who introduced it to the Western world in the 13th century. The sequence begins simply with the numbers 1 and 1. From that point forward, each number is created by adding the two numbers that came before it. The pattern unfolds like this: 1, E, R, San, Wu, Ba, Shisan, Arshiyi, San Shisu, Wu Shiwu, Ba Shijiu, and so on without end. What begins as a simple numerical rule soon reveals something extraordinary when these numbers are compared with the patterns found throughout nature. Plants appear to follow this sequence repeatedly in the arrangement of their leaves, petals, and seeds. Pine cones display spirals whose numbers often match consecutive Fibonacci values. Certain flowers grow petals in counts that align with the same pattern: 3 petals, 5 petals, 8 petals, 13 petals. Even the branching structure of some plants follows relationships that echo the sequence. The pattern emerges so frequently in living systems that it raises an intriguing question. Why should biological growth produce numbers that follow a mathematical sequence discovered by human thinkers centuries later? The answer becomes clearer when examining the relationship between the numbers themselves. As the Fibonacci sequence progresses, the ratio between one number and the next gradually approaches a constant value. When the numbers become large enough, the ratio stabilizes around approximately 1/2, a proportion known as the golden ratio. This ratio possesses a fascinating property. When a line is divided according to the golden ratio, the relationship between the longer segment and the shorter segment is identical to the relationship between the entire line and the longer segment. This self-repeating proportion creates a sense of balance that appears naturally harmonious to the human eye. Artists and architects have long been fascinated by this relationship because structures designed using similar proportions often appear visually pleasing. Renaissance painters sometimes arranged elements within their compositions using approximate golden ratio relationships. Certain classical buildings reflect proportions that echo the same balance. Even modern designers occasionally use the ratio when shaping objects intended to feel aesthetically satisfying. The presence of this ratio in nature, however, is far more intriguing than its use in art. The spirals of sunflower seeds follow Fibonacci numbers because this arrangement allows the seeds to pack together efficiently without leaving gaps. Each new seed grows at a slight angle from the previous one, and that angle produces spiral patterns that correspond to Fibonacci relationships. The plant is not consciously calculating mathematics. It is simply following a biological growth rule that naturally generates the pattern. The same principle appears in many other forms of life. A pine cone grows by adding new scales at consistent angles, producing 2 sets of spirals moving in opposite directions. The numbers of those spirals often match Fibonacci values because the arrangement allows the scales to occupy space efficiently while maintaining structural stability. In plants, leaves frequently grow around stems in patterns that prevent one leaf from blocking sunlight from another. The spacing produced by Fibonacci-related angles helps distribute leaves evenly around the plant, maximizing exposure to light. Nature seems to favor patterns that balance efficiency and stability, and the golden ratio often emerges naturally when those conditions are met. Spiral structures following similar proportions appear in other environments as well. Seashells provide a striking example. Many shells grow in curves known as logarithmic spirals, expanding outward while maintaining the same overall shape. As the organism grows, each new chamber becomes slightly larger than the previous one, preserving the proportional relationship that defines the spiral. This growth pattern allows the shell to expand without changing its fundamental structure. Even the movement of large natural systems sometimes reflects similar spiral forms. Hurricanes rotating across the ocean form broad spiral arms that resemble the curves seen in shells. Spiral galaxies stretching across millions of light years display sweeping arms of stars that follow similar logarithmic shapes. The forces governing these phenomena differ greatly from those shaping plants or shells, yet the resulting patterns often appear strikingly familiar. These repeating forms suggest that certain geometric relationships provide stable solutions to the challenges of growth and movement. When matter organizes itself under specific conditions, whether through biological development, fluid dynamics, or gravitational forces, spiral patterns often emerge because they distribute energy and space efficiently. The Fibonacci sequence and the golden ratio therefore reveal something subtle about the way the universe organizes complexity. Simple numerical relationships can generate structures that appear elegant and balanced across many different levels of scale. This observation has fascinated thinkers for centuries because it hints at an underlying harmony within the natural world. Mathematical relationships discovered through human reasoning seem to echo patterns already present in the environment long before those numbers were written down on paper. The universe appears to contain structures that follow consistent principles, whether they are observed in the arrangement of seeds in a flower, the growth of shells along a shoreline, or the vast rotations of galaxies far beyond the reach of the naked eye. Once these patterns become visible, Ordinary objects begin to look slightly different. A sunflower is no longer just a plant growing in a field. It becomes a living expression of mathematical relationships, unfolding quietly within the processes of nature. The same proportions repeat across living organisms, flowing water, atmospheric systems, and cosmic structures, suggesting that the language of geometry and number may be woven deeply into the way the universe shapes itself. Place a thin metal plate on top of a speaker and scatter a small layer of fine sand across its surface. At first, the sand lies quietly where it falls, forming no particular structure, just thousands of tiny grains resting randomly across the plate. The moment the speaker begins to emit a tone, however, the stillness disappears. The metal vibrates gently, and the grains begin to tremble, sliding across the surface as though guided by an invisible hand. Within seconds, the scattered particles rearrange themselves into striking geometric patterns, circles, star-like shapes, intricate webs of symmetry that seem far too precise to be accidental. Change the tone slightly and the entire pattern dissolves, only to reorganize itself into a completely new design. A higher frequency produces a more complex geometry, while a lower frequency creates simpler rings and lines. The sand is not thinking, deciding, or calculating anything. It simply follows the structure of the vibration moving through the plate. This phenomenon is known as cymatics, a field of study that explores how vibration influences the arrangement of matter. The word comes from the Greek term chyma, meaning wave. Cymatic experiments demonstrate something remarkable: sound, which we normally experience only as an audible sensation, can shape physical materials into visible patterns when allowed to interact with them in the right conditions. The effect becomes even more striking when different materials are used. Instead of sand, researchers sometimes place water in a shallow container attached to a vibrating surface. As sound waves travel through the water, ripples form across the surface in precise geometric arrangements. Certain frequencies generate concentric rings, others produce hexagonal grids, while some create elaborate structures resembling living organisms or crystalline lattices. Each vibration carries its own geometric signature, and the material responds by organizing itself along the lines of that invisible wave. These experiments reveal an intriguing relationship between vibration and form. Sound itself has no visible shape. It exists as a wave of pressure moving through a medium such as air, water, or metal. Yet, when that wave interacts with particles or fluids, the hidden structure of the vibration suddenly becomes visible through the patterns it produces. The grains of sand move toward areas where the vibration is calmest, gathering along lines where the wave motion cancels itself out. Physicists call these regions nodal lines. Along those lines, the surface remains relatively still, while surrounding areas vibrate more intensely. The particles naturally migrate toward these stable zones, gradually tracing the geometry of the wave that created them. The result is a map of vibration drawn with matter itself. What makes cymatics so fascinating is how closely the patterns resemble the geometric structures that appear throughout nature. Many of the shapes formed by vibrating sand circles, hexagons, radial symmetry mirror the kinds of arrangements seen in crystals, flowers, and cellular structures. The resemblance does not necessarily mean that sound alone creates these natural forms, yet it highlights an important principle. Vibration has the power to organize matter into stable patterns. Modern physics already describes the universe as a dynamic field of energy in constant motion. At the microscopic level, atoms vibrate continuously within molecules. Chemical bonds oscillate as electrons interact with atomic nuclei. Even the temperature of an object is simply a measure of how rapidly its particles are moving. The physical world that appears solid and stable is actually composed of countless vibrations unfolding simultaneously. Cymatics offers a rare opportunity to observe how vibration translates into visible structure. When a frequency moves through matter, it creates regions of motion and stillness, pressure and release. Materials responding to those forces arrange themselves accordingly, revealing the geometry hidden within the wave. The patterns appear almost instantly, demonstrating how quickly matter can reorganize itself when influenced by energy moving through it. The principle extends beyond sound waves alone. Similar effects occur with other forms of vibration. Electromagnetic waves, for example, influence the behavior of charged particles. Molecular vibrations shape chemical reactions and biological processes. Even large-scale systems such as atmospheric storms or ocean currents develop structures governed by the movement of energy through fluids. In each case, patterns emerge, not because matter decides to form them, but because the underlying energy organizes the system in specific ways. Cymatic experiments also reveal how sensitive these patterns can be. A slight adjustment in frequency transforms the geometry entirely. The sand that previously formed concentric rings may suddenly rearrange into star-like formations. Water surfaces that displayed smooth waves can shift into intricate lattices with only a small change in vibration. The structure is determined entirely by the frequency shaping the system. This sensitivity suggests that vibration carries an extraordinary capacity to influence form. While cymatics itself operates within controlled laboratory conditions, the phenomenon offers a glimpse into a deeper principle governing the natural world. The universe appears to be filled with fields of energy constantly vibrating and interacting with one another. Within those interactions, matter responds by forming stable patterns that reflect the forces shaping it. Seen through this lens, form and vibration become inseparable. Shapes arise from motion, and motion reveals itself through structure. A plate covered with sand, responding to a simple tone, becomes more than a laboratory demonstration. It becomes a window into the relationship between energy and matter, showing how invisible waves can guide particles into organized forms. The experiment quietly illustrates a principle that may operate across many levels of reality. Vibration does not merely move through the world, it participates in shaping the patterns that the world takes. Look at any object around you for a moment. A table, a stone, the walls of a building, even your own body. Everything appears solid, stable, and unmoving. The physical world gives the impression of permanence, as though matter were made of fixed pieces locked firmly in place. This assumption feels so natural that most people never question it. Yet the deeper science looks into the nature of matter. The more this familiar picture begins to dissolve into something far more dynamic and surprising. Inside every atom, almost nothing is still. An atom consists of a tiny nucleus surrounded by electrons moving in regions of probability rather than fixed orbits. The distances between these components are enormous compared to their size. If the nucleus of an atom were enlarged to the size of a marble placed in the center of a stadium, the electrons would be moving somewhere near the outer edges of the arena. Nearly everything in between would be empty space. What gives matter its apparent solidity is not tightly packed material, but the interaction of invisible forces and energy fields holding these particles in structured relationships. As physics advanced through the 20th century, this understanding deepened even further. Scientists discovered that particles behave not only like small objects, but also like waves of energy. Under certain conditions, electrons can interfere with themselves in ways that only waves can do. Light, once thought to be purely a wave, sometimes behaves like particles. The deeper researchers looked, the more matter began to resemble patterns of vibration within underlying energy fields. Modern physics now describes the universe as a vast network of interacting fields that extend throughout space. Particles are no longer viewed as isolated pieces of substance, but as localized excitations, small disturbances within those fields. In much the same way that a ripple appears on the surface of water when something disturbs it, what we call a particle may simply be a ripple in a deeper field of energy. This realization changes the way matter itself is understood. Rather than imagining the universe as a collection of solid building blocks, it becomes more accurate to imagine it as an ocean of energy where patterns of vibration create the structures we observe. Atoms are not static units, but dynamic systems vibrating continuously. Molecules oscillate within chemical bonds. Even objects that appear perfectly motionless contain countless particles moving at extraordinary speeds. Temperature itself reflects this hidden activity. When something becomes hot, its atoms vibrate more rapidly. When it cools, those vibrations slow down. The difference between ice, water, and steam is not the substance itself, but the energy and motion of the molecules within it. Matter shifts between forms depending on how its internal vibrations behave. One of the most famous equations in science reveals just how closely matter and energy are connected. Albert Einstein's equation, E equals mc squared, shows that mass and energy are interchangeable. Matter can transform into energy, and energy can become matter under the right conditions. Nuclear reactions demonstrate this dramatically, releasing immense amounts of energy from tiny amounts of mass. This equation carries a profound implication. Matter is not something separate from energy. It is energy concentrated into a stable form. The universe therefore appears less like a rigid structure and more like a dynamic system of interacting vibrations. Fields of energy fill space, and disturbances within those fields produce the particles and forces that shape the physical world. Some theoretical models push this idea even further. In string theory, one of the most ambitious attempts to unify physics, the fundamental components of reality are proposed to be incredibly tiny, vibrating strings of energy. According to this model, the different particles observed in nature arise from different vibrational modes of these strings, much like different musical notes emerge from the same string on a violin depending on how it vibrates. While string theory remains theoretical, the analogy offers an interesting way to imagine the structure of reality. The universe begins to resemble an immense symphony in which matter is formed from patterns of vibration moving through invisible fields. This perspective echoes insights that appeared in philosophical traditions long before modern physics existed. Some ancient texts describe the universe as emerging from primordial sound or vibration. These descriptions were symbolic rather than scientific, yet they reflect an intuitive sense that motion and resonance lie at the heart of existence. Science approaches the question through mathematics and experimentation, yet it continues to reveal that vibration is fundamental to the behavior of matter. Electromagnetic waves carry light across space. Gravitational waves ripple through the fabric of space-time when massive cosmic events occur. Quantum fields fluctuate constantly, producing particles and interactions that shape the universe. Even the emptiness of space is not truly empty. Quantum theory suggests that fluctuations of energy appear and disappear continuously within what we once believed was perfect vacuum. The universe is alive with motion. Every atom in your body vibrates. Every molecule in the air moves through invisible currents of energy. The solid ground beneath your feet is actually a vast arrangement of particles interacting through forces that keep them organized in stable patterns. Seen from this perspective, matter becomes a temporary expression of deeper energetic processes. Objects appear solid because the patterns forming them remain stable over time, not because they are truly motionless. Your own body reflects this same dynamic nature. Cells replace themselves constantly. Molecules circulate through tissues and bloodstream. Electrical signals move through neural pathways as thoughts form and dissolve. What appears to be a fixed physical identity is actually a living system of continuous activity. The idea that the universe operates through vibration does not reduce the world to something abstract. Instead, it reveals how deeply interconnected matter and energy truly are. Structures arise from motion, stability emerges from balance, and form grows out of patterns, moving through fields that extend across space. A quiet shift in perspective begins to occur when reality is viewed this way. The familiar objects surrounding you, stone, wood, metal, flesh, stop appearing as rigid blocks of substance. They become patterns of energy held together through intricate relationships of motion and force. The universe reveals itself not as a silent collection of things, but as an ongoing process of vibration, shaping matter into the forms that fill the visible world. Human experience is usually anchored to the physical senses: sight, sound, touch, taste, and smell constantly inform the mind about the surrounding environment, creating the stable impression that reality is limited to what the body can perceive directly. The ground feels solid beneath the feet. Objects occupy definite positions in space, and the world seems firmly structured around the boundaries of physical matter. Yet once the deeper nature of matter and energy begins to unfold, a different question quietly appears. If reality itself is built from layers of vibration and fields of energy, could there be levels of existence that operate beyond the range of the physical senses? Throughout history, many cultures propose that the visible world represents only the densest layer of a much larger structure of reality. Philosophers in ancient Greece spoke about subtle realms that interpenetrate the physical world. Indian and Tibetan traditions describe planes of existence composed of increasingly refined forms of energy. Medieval mystics in both the East and West wrote about invisible worlds that coexist with the material environment, accessible not through the eyes of the body, but through expanded states of awareness. Among the many terms used to describe these subtle levels of reality, one of the most widely known is the astral dimension. The word astral originates from the Latin word astrum, meaning star. Early thinkers used this term to describe a realm believed to exist between the physical world and the purely spiritual domain. It was imagined not as a distant location somewhere in outer space, but as a subtler layer of reality occupying the same space as the physical environment while operating at a different level of energy. One way to visualize this idea is to imagine the layers of the atmosphere surrounding the Earth. At ground level, the air is dense enough to support breathing and weather systems. Higher layers of the atmosphere become progressively thinner, yet they still exist in the same region of space. Satellites orbit through areas where the atmosphere becomes almost indistinguishable from outer space. Even though all of these layers are part of the same planetary environment, some philosophical traditions suggested that reality itself might be organized in a similar way. The physical world would represent the densest level, while subtler layers of energy and consciousness might exist beyond it, normally invisible, because the human senses evolved only to detect the frequencies necessary for survival. Modern science already recognizes that human perception is extremely limited in the range of signals it can detect. The electromagnetic spectrum alone contains vast ranges of frequencies far beyond visible light. Radio waves, infrared radiation, ultraviolet light, X-rays, and gamma rays all move through the same space as the visible world, yet they remain invisible unless special instruments are used to detect them. This realization has encouraged some thinkers to wonder whether other forms of subtle phenomena might also exist beyond the reach of ordinary senses. The concept of the astral dimension often appears in discussions of altered states of consciousness. During sleep, meditation, or intense psychological experiences, people sometimes report perceptions that feel detached from the physical body. Dreams provide the most familiar example. When the body sleeps, the senses disconnect from the external environment, yet the mind continues to generate vivid worlds filled with movement, sound, and interaction. Dreams demonstrate something remarkable about consciousness. It can create entire environments of experience even when the physical senses are inactive. Landscapes appear, conversations unfold, and events take place in ways that can feel completely real while the dream is occurring. Throughout history, some individuals reported experiences that felt similar to dreaming, yet occurred while they remained aware. These experiences were sometimes described as astral projection, the sensation of observing the physical body from an external perspective, or moving through environments that appear real yet subtly different from the physical world. Accounts of such experiences appear in mystical literature, spiritual traditions, and modern reports from individuals exploring altered states of awareness. Interpretations of these experiences vary widely. Some psychologists view them as vivid mental simulations produced by the brain under unusual conditions. Neuroscientists have shown that certain patterns of brain activity can produce the sensation of leaving the body or observing oneself from an external viewpoint. Others interpret these reports as glimpses of a subtle dimension of reality that becomes accessible when consciousness shifts away from ordinary sensory processing. Regardless of interpretation, these experiences highlight an important feature of human awareness. Perception is not limited to the signals delivered by the five senses. The mind possesses the ability to construct environments, explore memories, and imagine realities that extend beyond the immediate physical surroundings. Meditation practices in many traditions intentionally explore these inner states of awareness. Practitioners often describe the gradual quieting of the sensory mind as attention turns inward. As thoughts settle and external distractions fade, subtle impressions begin to arise, sensations of spaciousness, imagery, symbolic visions, or profound insights that feel as though they emerge from deeper layers of consciousness. Such experiences do not necessarily prove the existence of an astral dimension as a literal location in space. They do, however, demonstrate that consciousness can function in ways far more flexible than ordinary waking perception suggests. The concept of subtle worlds, therefore, occupies an interesting position between philosophy, psychology, and spirituality. It invites exploration without demanding a single explanation. Some view these realms as symbolic representations of the inner landscape of the mind. Others interpret them as energetic dimensions of reality that coexist with the physical universe. What remains clear is that human awareness has the capacity to explore levels of experience that extend far beyond ordinary sensory perception. The physical world remains the environment where bodies move and actions take place. Yet the landscape of consciousness itself appears far broader, containing layers of imagination, intuition, memory, and symbolic perception that can feel as vivid as external reality. Considering the possibility of subtle dimensions does not require abandoning scientific thinking. Instead, it encourages curiosity about the full range of human awareness and the ways perception might evolve when attention shifts beyond the familiar boundaries of the physical senses. Most people grow up believing that a human being is simply a physical body animated by thoughts and emotions. From childhood onward, the body becomes the central reference point for identity. The mirror reflects a face. The senses deliver experiences, and the mind organizes those experiences into memories that gradually form the story of a life. This understanding feels obvious because it is reinforced constantly by the physical world. The body moves. The body ages. The body interacts with the environment, and the mind interprets those interactions as the entirety of who a person is. Yet many philosophical and spiritual traditions across the world have suggested that human existence is far more layered than this familiar picture implies. They propose that the physical body represents only the outermost expression of a much deeper structure of consciousness. Beneath the visible form lies a series of subtle layers through which awareness interacts with reality, each one operating at a different level of energy and perception. These layers are sometimes described as the 7 dimensions of human existence. The first layer is the physical body, the level most familiar to everyday experience. It is composed of atoms and molecules arranged into the biological systems that sustain life. The physical body allows interaction with the material environment through the 5 senses, translating external signals into the experiences that form daily awareness. It anchors consciousness to the physical world and provides the vehicle through which action takes place. Behind this visible structure lies a second layer, often referred to as the energetic body or etheric field. Many traditions describe this level as the subtle energy system that sustains the physical organism. In Eastern practices, it is associated with concepts such as prana or chi, the life force believed to flow through channels within the body. While modern science has not fully confirmed the existence of such energy systems in the form described by ancient traditions, research into bioelectric fields and cellular communication has shown that living organisms are indeed surrounded by complex patterns of electromagnetic activity. This energetic layer is thought to maintain the vitality of the physical body, acting almost like a blueprint that guides biological processes. The third layer is often described as the emotional body. This level contains the patterns of feeling that shape how individuals respond to the world around them. Emotions influence perception, memory, and behavior in profound ways. A joyful state of mind can transform an ordinary moment into something luminous, while fear or anger can alter the way a person interprets even neutral events. Emotional patterns form energetic currents within the mind, shaping the way experiences are processed and remembered. Closely related to this layer is the 4th dimension of the self, the mental body. This level represents the realm of thoughts, beliefs, and intellectual structures that organize understanding. The mental body constructs concepts, analyzes information, and forms the narratives through which individuals interpret their lives. It is responsible for reasoning, imagination, and the ability to envision possibilities that extend beyond immediate sensory experience. Together, the emotional and mental layers shape much of what people recognize as personality. Beyond these more familiar aspects of the self, Many traditions describe additional layers associated with deeper forms of awareness. The fifth level is sometimes called the intuitive body. This layer relates to the capacity for insight that arises without deliberate reasoning. Intuition often appears as sudden clarity, a moment when the mind recognizes a truth that cannot be easily explained through logic alone. Artists, scientists, and philosophers frequently report that their most significant insights arrived through this quiet inner perception rather than through deliberate analysis. The sixth layer is described as the spiritual body, representing the dimension of consciousness connected with meaning, purpose, and the sense of belonging to something greater than the individual self. Experiences associated with this level often involve profound feelings of unity, compassion, or deep awareness of interconnectedness. Many contemplative traditions consider this dimension central to understanding the deeper nature of existence. At the deepest level lies what some philosophies call the core consciousness or higher self. This dimension is described as the pure awareness underlying all the other layers. It is not limited by thought, emotion, or physical form. Instead, it represents the fundamental presence that observes experience itself. In many contemplative traditions, realizing this deeper level of awareness is considered the central aim of spiritual development. Although these layers are often described separately for the sake of understanding, they do not exist as isolated compartments stacked inside the human being. They function more like overlapping fields of activity, each influencing the others continuously. Thoughts affect emotions. Emotions influence physical health, and physical states alter the clarity of the mind. The different layers of the self operate as an integrated system rather than independent parts. This multidimensional view of human existence encourages a broader understanding of identity. A person is not merely a body reacting to external stimuli, but a complex interplay of physical processes, emotional patterns, mental structures, and deeper levels of awareness. Each layer contributes to the way experiences unfold and how individuals interpret the world around them. Modern psychology and neuroscience often approach these ideas through different language, speaking about layers of cognition, subconscious processes, and the interplay between physiological states and mental activity. While the terminology differs, the central insight remains similar. Human consciousness operates through multiple interacting levels rather than a single, simple mechanism. Recognizing this complexity invites a different relationship with the self. Physical health, emotional balance, clarity of thought, intuitive understanding, and spiritual awareness become interconnected aspects of the same living system. Growth in one dimension influences the others, gradually transforming the way a person experiences reality. Within this perspective, the human being becomes more than a biological organism moving through the world. Each individual represents a dynamic intersection of physical matter, energy, thought, and consciousness interacting across multiple levels of existence. Exploring these layers does not necessarily require adopting any specific belief system. Instead, it invites curiosity about the depth of awareness itself and the many ways consciousness can experience reality beyond the surface of ordinary perception. Place your hand gently over the center of your chest for a moment and become aware of the steady rhythm beating beneath your palm. The heart rarely demands attention, yet it works tirelessly every second of your life. Day and night it contracts and relaxes in a precise sequence, pushing blood through an intricate network of vessels that stretches for tens of thousands of miles throughout the human body. Without this constant motion, the brain would fall silent within minutes, and every cell would begin to lose the energy required for life. For a long time, the heart was understood primarily as a biological pump, an efficient muscular organ responsible for circulating blood. That explanation is certainly correct. Yet modern research has revealed something far more interesting about the heart. Each time it beats, the heart produces a powerful electrical impulse that travels through the body, coordinating the contraction of its muscle fibers. This electrical activity generates an electromagnetic field that extends beyond the physical boundaries of the chest. Sensitive instruments can measure this field several feet away from the body. What makes this discovery remarkable is the strength of the signal. The electromagnetic field produced by the heart is far stronger than the field generated by the brain. Every heartbeat sends waves of electrical and magnetic activity outward through the body and into the surrounding environment. These signals carry information about the state of the heart's rhythm, and the rhythm itself changes depending on a person's emotional condition. When someone experiences calm appreciation or compassion, the heart rhythm becomes smooth and coherent, forming a stable wave pattern. Under stress or anger, the rhythm becomes irregular and chaotic. The heart responds to emotional states instantly, reflecting the inner experience of the individual in measurable electromagnetic patterns. This phenomenon suggests that the heart is more than a mechanical pump. It functions as a dynamic center of communication between the body, the brain, and the environment. The electrical signals generated by the heart travel through the nervous system, influencing brain activity and regulating many physiological processes. Researchers studying heart-brain interactions have found that signals traveling from the heart to the brain actually outnumber those traveling in the opposite direction. In other words, the heart continuously sends information to the brain, affecting perception, emotional processing, and even decision-making. Ancient traditions often describe the heart as the seat of consciousness or the center of human awareness. In poetic language, the heart was said to hold wisdom deeper than the analytical mind. While such statements were once dismissed as metaphorical, modern discoveries about the heart's complex electromagnetic activity have reopened curiosity about the deeper role this organ may play in human experience. The heart contains its own network of neurons, sometimes called the intrinsic cardiac nervous system. This network allows the heart to process certain signals independently of the brain. Although it does not function as a thinking brain, it demonstrates that the heart participates in a complex communication system rather than simply responding passively to commands from the nervous system. The idea of a heart field emerges from this interaction between electrical activity, emotional states, and electromagnetic signals. Each heartbeat sends waves of information outward, and those waves carry the imprint of the emotional condition, influencing the heart's rhythm. Consider what happens during moments of strong emotion. When someone experiences deep gratitude, love, or compassion, the body often enters a state of physiological harmony. Breathing becomes steady, muscles relax, and attention feels focused yet calm. The heart rhythm stabilizes into a coherent pattern that supports efficient communication between the cardiovascular system, the brain, and the rest of the body. This coherence appears to influence cognitive performance as well. Studies have shown that individuals experiencing positive emotional states often display improved clarity of thought, better decision-making, and greater resilience under pressure. The heart's rhythm seems to help organize activity within the nervous system, supporting a more balanced internal state. In contrast, emotional stress disrupts this harmony. Rapid, irregular heart rhythms signal the body to enter defensive states. Hormones associated with stress circulate through the bloodstream. Attention narrows, and mental clarity often diminishes. The body becomes prepared for immediate survival responses rather than thoughtful reflection. These observations reveal how deeply emotional states influence the body's internal systems. Beyond the biological effects, the electromagnetic nature of the heart field raises another intriguing possibility. Because the heart generates measurable signals that extend beyond the body, some researchers have begun exploring whether these signals might influence other people in close proximity. Early experiments suggest that the heart rhythms of individuals interacting with one another can sometimes synchronize, especially when emotional connection is strong. Human relationships may therefore involve subtle exchanges of physiological information that occur below the level of conscious awareness. Anyone who has walked into a room and instantly sensed the emotional atmosphere has experienced a simple example of this phenomenon. Even without words, people can feel whether an environment carries tension, calmness, or warmth. While psychology explains much of this through facial expressions and body language, the electromagnetic activity of the heart may contribute to these subtle perceptions as well. Seen from a broader perspective, the heart becomes a bridge between the physical body and the emotional life of consciousness. Its rhythmic signals translate feelings into measurable patterns of energy that influence the brain, the nervous system, and possibly even the environment surrounding the individual. This understanding encourages a different way of thinking about awareness. Consciousness does not appear to reside exclusively in the brain. Instead, it emerges from a complex network of interactions involving the heart, the nervous system, and the energetic processes flowing through the body. Every heartbeat becomes part of that network, sending waves of information through the internal systems that sustain life. The quiet rhythm in the center of the chest therefore represents more than a biological function. It is a continuous pulse of energy, linking the physical body with the emotional and cognitive dimensions of human experience. A dynamic field through which the inner state of a person subtly shapes the way they engage with the world around them. Deep within the center of the human brain lies a structure so small that it often escapes attention, yet for centuries it has stirred curiosity among philosophers, scientists, and spiritual thinkers alike. This structure is the pineal gland, a tiny organ roughly the size of a grain of rice, nestled between the two hemispheres of the brain in a protected cavity near the thalamus. Despite its small size, its location at the very center of the brain has long made it a subject of fascination. Ancient traditions sometimes referred to it as the inner eye, while later philosophers described it as a bridge between the physical body and the deeper dimensions of consciousness. From a biological perspective, the pineal gland plays a well-established role in regulating the body's internal clock. It produces the hormone melatonin, which helps control the cycle of sleep and wakefulness. When darkness falls and the eyes stop receiving strong light signals, the pineal gland increases melatonin production, encouraging the body to move toward rest. When daylight returns, melatonin levels decrease, allowing the body to wake and become active again. This rhythm synchronizes the body with the natural cycle of day and night, linking human physiology to the rotation of the earth itself. The pineal gland therefore functions as a kind of biological timekeeper, translating signals from the external environment into chemical messages that guide the body's internal rhythms. Yet the story of the pineal gland has never been limited to its biological function alone. Throughout history, its unusual characteristics have inspired deeper speculation about the nature of perception and consciousness. The gland's central position in the brain, combined with its sensitivity to light cycles, led some early thinkers to imagine that it might serve as a point where physical sensory information and inner awareness meet. The French philosopher René Descartes famously described the pineal gland as the seat of the soul. Although modern neuroscience does not support that specific claim, Descartes' fascination reflected an intuition that this small organ might hold a special role in human experience. Unlike many other structures in the brain, the pineal gland is singular rather than paired, meaning there is only one rather than two mirrored structures. This unusual symmetry further strengthened the impression that it might function as a central point of integration within the brain. Scientific research has continued exploring its properties with increasing precision. The pineal gland contains cells known as pinealocytes, which respond to signals transmitted from the retina through a chain of neural connections. Even though the gland sits deep inside the skull and does not receive light directly, it remains closely connected to the visual system. Light entering the eyes influences neural pathways that ultimately regulate pineal activity. This connection between light and inner chemistry creates an intriguing relationship between perception and biological rhythm. Sunlight influences mood, energy levels, and cognitive clarity in ways that many people recognize intuitively. Long periods without sunlight can lead to seasonal mood changes, while exposure to natural light often improves alertness and emotional balance. The pineal gland participates in this relationship by adjusting hormonal signals in response to the light cycles reaching the eyes. In this sense, the gland acts as a translator between the external environment and the internal state of the body. Beyond its hormonal role, the pineal gland has also drawn attention because of its chemical complexity. Among the compounds associated with the pineal is dimethyltryptamine, often abbreviated as DMT. This molecule belongs to a class of naturally occurring compounds capable of influencing perception when introduced into the brain. Although the exact role of endogenous DMT in human physiology remains an area of ongoing research, its presence has inspired speculation about whether the pineal gland might participate in unusual states of awareness. Many contemplative traditions have long described experiences in which perception seems to expand beyond ordinary sensory boundaries. During deep meditation, intense dreaming, or certain altered states of consciousness, individuals sometimes report vivid imagery, heightened insight, or sensations of entering expanded realms of awareness. Some thinkers have wondered whether chemical processes involving the pineal gland could play a role in facilitating these experiences. While scientific understanding of such states remains incomplete, research continues exploring how brain chemistry, neural networks, and consciousness interact. Symbolically, the idea of the inner eye, often associated with the pineal gland, represents the capacity for perception that extends beyond ordinary sensory input. The physical eyes observe the external world through light and form, while the inner eye symbolizes the ability to perceive meaning, intuition, and insight arising from within the mind itself. This metaphor appears in many cultural traditions. Ancient Egyptian art frequently depicts an eye symbol representing awareness and protection. In Indian philosophy, the concept of the third eye refers to expanded perception and spiritual insight. These symbols do not necessarily refer to a literal anatomical structure, but rather to the human potential to see beyond surface appearances. The pineal gland, positioned at the center of the brain and sensitive to light cycles, naturally became associated with this symbolic idea. Modern neuroscience continues to investigate the pineal gland primarily through its physiological functions. Yet the curiosity surrounding it reflects a broader fascination with the nature of perception itself. Human awareness is capable of far more than simply registering external stimuli. Imagination, intuition, dreams, and abstract thought all arise within the brain's complex networks, demonstrating that perception operates on multiple levels. In this broader sense, the awakening of the inner eye can be understood not as a mystical transformation, but as a gradual expansion of awareness. As attention deepens and the mind becomes more attentive to subtle impressions, individuals often discover layers of perception that extend beyond the immediate information delivered by the senses. The pineal gland sits quietly within the center of the brain, performing its biological functions without drawing attention to itself. Yet its presence has inspired centuries of reflection about the deeper capacities of human consciousness. Its small size contrasts sharply with the vast questions it raises about how the mind experiences reality and how awareness might evolve when it begins exploring the subtle dimensions of perception that lie beneath the surface of everyday thought. Human beings have always searched for meaning in the patterns that appear within their lives. Long before written language or scientific instruments existed, people noticed that certain events seemed to carry a strange sense of significance, as if the universe were communicating through subtle signals rather than direct words. A dream might present a vivid image that later seems connected to something happening in waking life. A symbol encountered repeatedly might appear just when a person is facing an important decision. Two events that seem unrelated might unfold in such an unlikely sequence that they feel mysteriously connected. Experiences like these have often been described as part of a deeper, symbolic language woven into the fabric of reality. Unlike ordinary language, this form of communication does not rely on spoken sentences or written symbols arranged in grammatical structure. Instead, it appears through patterns, coincidences, images, and meaningful alignments between inner experience and external events. Philosophers, psychologists, and spiritual traditions have long explored the idea that human consciousness may interact with reality through these symbolic patterns, receiving insight through channels that operate beyond logical analysis. Dreams provide one of the clearest examples of this symbolic dimension of awareness. Every night, the mind enters a state where the ordinary rules of perception change dramatically. The body rests, the senses withdraw from the physical environment, and the mind begins constructing experiences through imagery, emotion, and narrative. Within dreams, symbols appear naturally. A staircase might represent progress or transition. A journey through unfamiliar landscapes might reflect the movement of the mind through personal challenges or growth. What makes dreams particularly fascinating is the way they weave meaning through metaphor rather than direct explanation. Instead of presenting logical arguments, the dreaming mind expresses ideas through images that carry emotional and psychological significance. The language of dreams, therefore, resembles the language of art or poetry more than the structured logic of everyday speech. Psychologists such as Carl Jung devoted significant effort to understanding this symbolic language. Jung proposed that many dream symbols arise from what he called the collective unconscious, a deeper layer of the mind shared by all human beings. According to this theory, certain archetypal images such as the hero, the wise guide, the shadow, or the journey appear repeatedly across cultures because they reflect universal patterns within the human psyche. Dreams become a gateway through which these deeper structures express themselves. Yet symbolic communication does not occur only during sleep. Many people notice patterns of meaningful coincidence appearing within ordinary waking life. A person might be thinking intensely about a particular question when a book, conversation, or unexpected encounter suddenly introduces the exact idea needed to move forward. Someone might repeatedly encounter the same symbol in different contexts over a short period of time, creating the impression that reality itself is pointing attention toward a particular theme. Carl Jung referred to these experiences as synchronicity, a term describing meaningful coincidences that cannot easily be explained through ordinary cause and effect. In synchronicity, two events become connected, not because one physically causes the other, but because they share a common meaning for the person experiencing them. Imagine thinking about an old friend you have not spoken to for years, only to receive a message from them later that day. The two events may be statistically possible, yet the timing creates a powerful sense of connection. Moments like these often leave people wondering whether deeper patterns might link inner thoughts and outer events in ways that remain largely unexplored. From a psychological perspective, synchronicity may reflect the mind's remarkable ability to detect patterns and assign meaning to coincidences that resonate with personal experience. Human perception constantly searches for relationships between events, and when two events align in an emotionally meaningful way, the experience can feel profound. From a philosophical perspective, some thinkers have suggested that synchronicities might hint at deeper connections within the structure of reality itself. If the universe operates through interconnected fields of information and energy, then inner states of consciousness and external events might occasionally align in ways that reveal those hidden connections. Regardless of interpretation, these experiences highlight the human tendency to perceive meaning through symbols and patterns rather than purely through rational explanation. Symbols occupy a unique position in human consciousness. A symbol does not carry a single fixed definition the way a word in a dictionary does. Instead, it functions as a container of meaning capable of holding multiple interpretations simultaneously. A circle, for example, may represent unity, eternity, completion, or balance depending on the context in which it appears. Because of this flexibility, symbols can communicate ideas that are difficult to express through direct language. They allow the mind to explore complex emotional and philosophical concepts through imagery and metaphor. Religious traditions throughout the world have relied heavily on symbolic language for this reason. Sacred texts often describe spiritual insights through stories, vision, and symbolic imagery rather than literal instruction. The symbolism allows individuals to interpret the message according to their own experiences and level of understanding. The language of the cosmos, if such a language exists, may operate in a similar way. Instead of delivering direct statements, it may reveal meaning through patterns, dreams, coincidences, and symbols that invite reflection rather than demand certainty. These signals do not appear as commands or instructions. They function more like mirrors reflecting the inner state of the observer. A person moving through life with curiosity and awareness may begin noticing how frequently symbolic patterns appear within ordinary experiences. A conversation overheard at the right moment, an image appearing repeatedly in different contexts, or a dream that seems to illuminate an unresolved question can all feel like fragments of a larger dialogue between the mind and the world around it. Interpreting these experiences requires sensitivity rather than rigid logic. Symbols rarely reveal their meaning immediately. Their significance often becomes clear only through reflection, as the mind gradually recognizes how the imagery connects with personal experience. In this sense, the symbolic language of dreams and synchronicity functions less like a coded message and more like a conversation between consciousness and reality. The universe does not speak through sentences. It communicates through patterns that invite awareness to deepen its understanding. Attentiveness becomes the key to perceiving this language. When the mind moves through life mechanically, many subtle signals pass unnoticed. When awareness becomes more reflective, the ordinary events of life begin to reveal layers of meaning hidden beneath their surface. Symbols, dreams, and meaningful coincidences therefore represent more than curious psychological phenomena. They form a bridge between inner awareness and the unfolding patterns of the world, suggesting that the relationship between consciousness and reality may be richer and more interconnected than everyday perception first suggests. Across many ancient traditions, there appears a recurring idea that the human being is more than a physical organism moving through space. Beneath the biological structure, beneath the chemical processes that sustain life, there exists a subtler dimension of energy and consciousness that shapes how awareness interacts with reality. Mystics and philosophers often describe this dimension as a light body, an energetic structure surrounding and interpenetrating the physical form. It was not imagined as a metaphor, but as a dynamic field through which consciousness could expand beyond the limits of ordinary perception. Among the symbols associated with this idea, one of the most intriguing is the Merkaba. The word Merkaba comes from ancient linguistic roots, often translated as light, spirit, and body. When combined, these meanings describe a vehicle of consciousness, a structure through which awareness can move between levels of existence. Although the term appears in several spiritual traditions, its symbolic form is often represented geometrically as two interlocking tetrahedrons rotating in opposite directions. A tetrahedron is one of the simplest three-dimensional geometric shapes, composed of four triangular faces forming a pyramid-like structure. When two tetrahedrons intersect, one pointing upward and the other pointing downward, they create a perfectly balanced star-like figure, sometimes referred to as a star tetrahedron. This form is not only visually striking but mathematically elegant. It represents equilibrium between opposing forces, an interplay between upward expansion and downward grounding. The upward-pointing tetrahedron is often associated symbolically with consciousness rising toward higher awareness, while the downward-pointing tetrahedron represents the descent of energy into the physical world. Their intersection suggests a meeting point between spirit and matter, a place where the invisible dimensions of awareness interact with the visible structure of reality. Sacred geometry frequently uses this form to illustrate balance within creation. Many ancient cultures believed that geometric patterns were not merely artistic designs but reflections of the underlying structure of the universe. Circles, spirals, triangles, and polyhedra appeared repeatedly in natural forms, from the crystalline structure of minerals to the growth patterns of plants and the symmetry of living organisms. Geometry seemed to express the hidden order guiding the formation of matter itself. Within this perspective, the Merkaba became a symbol of the geometric harmony underlying human consciousness. Some traditions describe the Merkaba as an energetic field surrounding the human body in the shape of the star tetrahedron. This field is imagined as rotating, generating a dynamic interaction between the physical body and higher levels of awareness. The rotation of these geometric forms is said to create a flow of energy that stabilizes and expands consciousness. Whether interpreted literally or symbolically, the concept points toward an important insight. Consciousness may operate through patterns of energy that are structured rather than chaotic. Consider how the human body itself demonstrates geometric organization. Cells arrange themselves into tissues with precise structure. The double helix of DNA forms a spiral encoding the instructions of life. Neural networks within the brain create complex patterns that give rise to perception, memory, and thought. Geometry appears repeatedly in biological systems because structure allows energy to move efficiently through living organisms. In the same way, symbolic geometric forms have been used to represent the architecture of consciousness. Meditative traditions often incorporate visualization of geometric patterns as a way to focus awareness. When the mind concentrates on symmetrical forms, its activity can become more coherent and stable. The regularity of geometric structures encourages the brain to settle into rhythms that promote clarity and stillness. Through sustained attention, individuals may begin experiencing a sense of expanded awareness, as if the boundaries of ordinary perception soften and the mind becomes more receptive to subtle impressions. Within such practices, the Merkaba symbol serves as a representation of alignment between body, mind, and consciousness. The idea of a light body does not require imagining a literal glowing form surrounding the physical body. Instead, it can be understood as a way of describing the energetic and informational processes through which awareness interacts with reality. The nervous system generates electrical signals, the heart produces electromagnetic rhythms, and the brain processes vast networks of sensory and cognitive information. These activities create a complex energetic environment surrounding the physical organism. The Merkaba symbol expresses this complexity through geometry rather than scientific terminology. Two opposing tetrahedrons intersecting within a single structure illustrate balance between forces that might otherwise appear contradictory. Movement and stillness, expansion and grounding, matter and consciousness. All of these dualities are represented within the symmetrical structure of the star tetrahedron. When people contemplate this geometry, they often describe a feeling of alignment or harmony, as if the symbol reminds the mind of an order that exists beneath the surface of everyday experience. The deeper meaning of the Merkaba, therefore, lies not in mystical claims but in what the symbol suggests about the relationship between consciousness and structure. Awareness does not emerge randomly. It arises through organized systems, biological, energetic, and cognitive, that allow perception and thought to take shape. Geometry offers a language capable of describing that organization in visual form. Throughout history, symbols like the Merkaba have served as bridges between science, philosophy, and spirituality. They invite reflection on the possibility that consciousness itself might operate according to patterns just as elegant as the geometric structures appearing throughout nature. Seen in this light, the Merkaba becomes less a mystical artifact and more a visual metaphor for the multidimensional nature of human awareness. The physical body represents one layer of existence, yet the processes of thought, emotion, intuition, and perception extend far beyond the boundaries of flesh and bone. The interlocking tetrahedrons quietly illustrate that intersection, an elegant geometry suggesting that the structure of consciousness may be far more intricate than ordinary perception reveals. There is a kind of knowledge that comes through study. You read books, analyze information, compare ideas, and gradually build an understanding of the world through logic and observation. This form of knowledge is powerful and necessary. It allows civilizations to develop science, technology, medicine, and philosophy. Through the disciplined use of reason, human beings have learned how stars are born, how atoms behave, and how life evolves across millions of years. Yet there exists another kind of knowing that does not arrive through analysis or intellectual effort. It appears suddenly, quietly, and often without warning. A realization emerges fully formed, as if it had always been present beneath the surface of awareness. There is no chain of reasoning leading up to it, no gradual accumulation of evidence. The mind simply recognizes something with complete clarity. This type of knowing has often been called gnosis. The word gnosis comes from ancient Greek, meaning direct knowledge or inner knowing. Unlike ordinary knowledge, which is learned from external sources, gnosis refers to understanding that arises from within consciousness itself. It is not acquired through argument or instruction. Instead, it appears as immediate recognition, as if a hidden truth has suddenly stepped forward into the light of awareness. Philosophers and mystics across many cultures have described this phenomenon. In spiritual traditions, it is often associated with moments of awakening, insight, or illumination. In scientific and artistic contexts, it appears as sudden inspiration. A mathematician struggles with a problem for weeks. Then one evening, the solution emerges in a flash of clarity. A composer hears an entire melody in the mind before writing a single note. A scientist suddenly sees the pattern connecting ideas that previously seemed unrelated. These experiences reveal that the mind possesses levels of understanding beyond deliberate reasoning. Intellectual thought works step by step. It analyzes, compares, and builds conclusions gradually. Direct knowing operates differently. It moves instantly, bypassing the slow pathways of logical deduction. The mind does not construct the answer, it recognizes it. Modern psychology often refers to this process as insight cognition. Studies of creative thinking show that the brain sometimes reorganizes information unconsciously before presenting a solution to conscious awareness. When the insight arrives, people often experience a distinctive sensation of certainty known as the aha moment. Brain imaging studies have even detected bursts of neural activity in specific regions just before such insights occur. These findings suggest that the mind is capable of processing information far beyond what conscious thought alone can manage. Yet gnosis, in its deeper philosophical sense, points towards something even more profound. It suggests that consciousness itself may have the ability to perceive truth directly, without relying entirely on analytical reasoning. Consider how you recognize certain things immediately. When you look into the face of someone you care about, you do not analyze their features mathematically before recognizing them. Recognition happens instantly. The mind knows without calculation. Something similar occurs when a person senses the authenticity or falseness of a situation, long before the intellect constructs an explanation. An intuitive signal may arise, indicating that something feels right or wrong. Only afterward does the rational mind attempt to justify that feeling through logical arguments. Direct knowing, therefore, appears to operate through a deeper layer of perception within consciousness. Philosophical traditions often describe this layer as the inner witness or higher awareness, a dimension of the mind capable of perceiving reality without distortion from habitual beliefs or emotional reactions. When this deeper awareness becomes active, understanding may arise spontaneously. Meditative practices across cultures have often been designed to cultivate access to this level of knowing. By quieting the constant stream of thoughts that usually dominate the mind, individuals sometimes discover that insight begins to emerge naturally. The mind becomes less occupied with analyzing every experience and more capable of perceiving patterns directly. Silence plays an important role in this process. When mental noise subsides, subtle perceptions become easier to recognize. Ideas appear that might otherwise remain hidden beneath layers of distraction and habitual thinking. Many of history's greatest thinkers describe their most profound discoveries in terms that resemble gnosis rather than calculation. Albert Einstein once remarked that imagination and intuition were more important to discovery than strict logic. The mathematician Henri Poincaré described solutions to complex problems appearing suddenly during moments when he was not consciously thinking about them. Such insights did not arise through step-by-step reasoning, but through sudden recognition. The intellect then works afterward to translate that recognition into structured knowledge. This relationship between intuition and intellect is important. Gnosis does not replace rational thought, it complements it. Direct knowing provides the spark of insight, while the analytical mind tests, refines, and communicates that insight in a form others can understand. Without intuition, thought becomes mechanical and limited to familiar patterns. Without reason, intuition cannot be clearly expressed or verified. Together they form a balanced approach to understanding reality. In spiritual philosophy, gnosis often represents the deepest form of self-understanding. It is not merely knowledge about the world, but recognition of the nature of consciousness itself. Instead of learning about truth through external teachings, the individual experiences it directly through awareness. This form of knowing cannot easily be transferred from one person to another through words alone. Books and teachings can point toward it, but the realization must occur within the consciousness of the individual. Because of this, gnosis has often been described as a form of awakening. It is the moment when understanding shifts from intellectual belief to direct recognition. A person may study philosophy for years, reading countless explanations about the nature of the mind or the structure of reality. Then one day a quiet realization arises that suddenly makes all those ideas clear in a way that words never could. The knowledge was present in the teachings, yet it only becomes real when the mind sees it directly. This is the essence of gnosis. It is the quiet recognition that truth is not always discovered through argument or analysis. Sometimes it appears when the mind becomes still enough to perceive what was already present, waiting patiently beneath the surface of thought. Throughout this journey, a quiet thread has been running beneath every idea we have explored together. It began with the recognition that human perception reveals only a small fraction of reality. From there, the exploration moved through layers of consciousness, subtle dimensions of awareness, the language of symbols and dreams, the hidden intelligence within geometry, and the mysterious capacity of the mind to know things directly without relying solely on logic. Each of these themes pointed toward the same possibility, that the human being may be capable of perceiving far more than ordinary experience suggests. At the center of that possibility lies something often described as inner vision. Inner vision does not refer to seeing physical objects with the eyes. It is not a supernatural ability or a mystical power reserved for a select few. Instead, it represents a shift in awareness, a way of perceiving reality that emerges when consciousness begins to observe itself more clearly. While the physical eyes look outward at the world of forms, inner vision looks inward at the processes of perception itself. Most people spend their lives focused almost entirely on the outer world. Attention is drawn constantly toward tasks, responsibilities, conversations, and the endless stream of information flowing through modern life. The mind becomes accustomed to reacting quickly, forming judgments, solving problems, and planning the next step before the present moment has even fully unfolded. This constant outward movement of attention creates the impression that reality exists entirely outside the mind. Yet consciousness itself is the medium through which every experience occurs. Every sound you hear, every image you see, every memory you recall, and every thought you form appears within awareness. Without consciousness, the world as you know it would not exist in any meaningful way. The senses deliver signals, but it is consciousness that transforms those signals into the living experience of reality. Inner vision begins when attention turns toward this simple but profound fact. Instead of observing only the objects appearing in awareness, the mind begins to notice the awareness in which those objects arise. Thoughts come and go. Emotions rise and fade. Sensations move through the body like waves across the surface of water. Beneath all of these changing experiences, there remains a quiet presence capable of observing them. This observing presence is often so familiar that it goes unnoticed. From childhood onward, the mind learns to identify itself with thoughts, roles, and memories. A person says, "I am my profession," or "I am my personality," or "I am the story of my life." These identities feel solid because they are reinforced by social interaction and personal history. Yet when attention turns inward carefully, something surprising becomes visible. Thoughts change constantly, yet the awareness observing those thoughts remains. Emotions fluctuate throughout the day, yet the presence, noticing those emotions, does not disappear. Even the physical body transforms gradually over time, replacing cells and shifting through different stages of life. Still, there remains a continuity of awareness that has been present through every moment of experience. Inner vision recognizes that continuity. It is the realization that consciousness itself is not merely a byproduct of the body, but the very space within which all experience unfolds. The mind begins to see that thoughts are events appearing within awareness rather than the source of awareness itself. This shift can feel subtle at first. The mind may briefly glimpse the distinction between awareness and the thoughts moving through it, then quickly return to its usual patterns. Yet with patience and attention, that glimpse can gradually deepen. The observer becomes clearer, quieter, and more stable. Many contemplative traditions describe this process as a form of awakening. The word awakening can sound dramatic, yet in its simplest sense it means becoming aware of something that was previously overlooked. A person who has been dreaming eventually recognizes that they are dreaming. The environment may appear exactly the same, yet the perspective has changed completely. Something similar occurs when inner vision begins to unfold. The external world does not disappear. Life continues with its ordinary responsibilities and experiences. What changes is the relationship between consciousness and the stream of thoughts and perceptions passing through it. Instead of being carried unconsciously by every thought, awareness begins to observe those thoughts with a degree of clarity. Moments of silence become more noticeable. The space between thoughts reveals a calm presence that had always been there but rarely received attention. Actions arise more naturally when they are not driven entirely by habitual reactions. This transformation does not require abandoning the world or withdrawing from ordinary life. In fact, inner vision often makes everyday experiences feel more vivid. Colors appear sharper, conversations feel more meaningful, and the simple rhythm of breathing becomes easier to notice. Awareness is no longer lost inside constant mental noise. The return to the true nature of consciousness, therefore, does not involve acquiring something new. Nothing external needs to be added to the mind. Instead, it is a process of remembering something that has always been present beneath the surface of thought. The observer within you, the quiet awareness, noticing these words as you read them, has been there from the very beginning. It was present when you experienced your earliest memories. It remained through every stage of growth and change. Even during moments when the mind felt confused or overwhelmed, awareness itself continued observing the unfolding experience. Inner vision simply turns attention toward that presence. When consciousness recognizes itself in this way, a subtle shift occurs in how life is experienced. The mind continues to think, plan, and respond to the world, yet it no longer feels entirely confined by those activities. Thoughts become tools rather than masters, and awareness begins to rest more naturally in its own clarity. The journey through all the ideas explored in this series ultimately circles back to this simple discovery. Behind the complexity of symbols, energy, geometry, and perception lies a quiet fact that has always been true. Consciousness has been observing every moment from the very beginning, patiently waiting to be noticed.